the qualities that you talked about that define or help to define Switzerland's competitiveness, they're timeless in your mind?
No, you have to fight every day for it.
Of
course, you have to fight every day for it. It's not
They're
a
not
matter
given.
of them and us. It's
Yeah.
a matter of all of us.
Yeah.
So you have to be managing your company so that you keep the better people, continue to attract the better people, continue to attract the better clients, continue to open the markets as much as you can rather than close, etc. When you're an economic actor.
Yeah.
When you're a public servant, you have to make sure that you listen to the needs and the demand of the population, and you don't create those paradoxes I was alluding to.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that you create the right frame conditions for those businesses to develop according to what I just said.
Just don't take advantage of the fact that you think that will just happen. It's a given.
It's a fight of every day, and it's a good fight. Yeah, positive fight, because it brings positive results.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Getting Serious with Woody Wade. I'm Woody Wade, and I'm here on behalf of GGBA, the Greater Geneva Bern area. And my guest today is Patrick Odier, who is one of Switzerland's most respected and also most consequential leaders in banking and finance. We'll have a lot to talk about that sector, but in particular, I'd like to talk about Switzerland itself. And then, of course, I understand you've got a very interesting project that you'd like to speak about, and we'll get to that for sure. But to continue on with just a little bit more information about my guest today, Patrick has spent more than 4 decades at Lombard Odier, which is one of Switzerland's oldest private banks, founded in the late 1790s. And he served as senior managing partner during a time when he helped the institution actually go through a period of very profound change that was occurring in global finance all across the sector. Now, beyond Lombard Odier, he has also played a leading role in shaping the broader Swiss financial sector, including serving as chairman of the Swiss Bankers Association, and more recently as president of Swiss Sustainable Finance and chairman of Building Bridges, which is the project that brings him to Lausanne today to be with us. And this initiative, which we'll be talking about in more detail, is very interesting because it brings together finance, government, academia, and international organizations to address some of the issues concerning global sustainability and sustainable investment. Throughout his career, Patrick's been an advocate not only for sound finance, that goes without saying, but especially for long-term thinking. And of course, you're talking to the institution that's more than 200 years old, long-term thinking is, of course, something that's absolutely vital. So this is about responsible stewardship. It's about Switzerland's role as a trusted partner of investors and of individuals who are looking for someone to help them look after and grow their own assets over time. And all this in an increasingly complex world. So I think we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about today. What I want to do is explore not only the future of Swiss banking, but in particular of Switzerland itself, and to talk about its strengths, how you see it, its challenges, some of the opportunities that are ahead of us. So let me start out with a kind of a very basic question. Switzerland has been successful for a really long time, and as you know for sure, there are, and I find this ironic that there are 2 competing competitiveness reports in the world, right? And Switzerland always comes out at the very top of both of them. In one of them, I think it's 15 years in a row, it's been number 1, and the other bounces around between number 1 and number 2, number 3, whatever. But the point is that the country punches above its weight. Obviously, it's seen as competitive on all of these particular criteria that each of these reports uses, which may not be exactly the same, but fairly close probably. From your perspective, what do you think if you strip away the cliches of the chocolate and the trains run on time, and I mean some of the things that that people just talk about, the man on the street would talk about. From your perspective as a leader, particularly in this industry that's been changing a lot globally over the last, say, 30, 40 years, what is it that makes Switzerland so competitive? And the second part of that question is, will it remain competitive in the future?
Well, I think I would start by the quality of the skill set that we have in Switzerland. And this quality probably stems from our educational system itself, which allows not only the young generations to get educated from an academic point of view, but also from a professional point of view very, very, very early. This vocational educational system of ours has proven to be one of the key to the success of not only having very loyal staff in most of the industries, but also very skilled labor forces in most of the industries, because they learn it on the job,
Right.
while at the same time they grow on the job. And that means that it creates a sort of a deep root of the tradition of whatever the sector in Switzerland can be, artisanal or service-oriented, but it also creates a huge loyalty. Loyalty brings me to the second aspect, which is the stability of our overall system. Stability is a precondition for sustainability, and that's perhaps coming from, I would say, at least two other factors. One is the fact that our country is based on a very, very, very strong rule today, which says basically that the house has to be kept tidy, meaning that you don't spend more than you earn. And I think this rule has been well respected, and despite some oppositions from certain side of the political exchequer. And the second is what we call the labor peace principle, which basically says that employee and employers are discussing between each other the conditions at which the relationship will be functioning for the forthcoming future. And they get to an agreement rather than to an opposition and a fight, like you can see in many countries.
Right.
So if you take that stability being the second factor, I think this is probably another factor which is quite important in our country, which is the access to the political system. We don't speak enough about
not the political system itself, but the access to it.
The access to the political system, which means basically having access to those who make the political decisions, having access, of course, usually it's the case, but true access means discussion and dialogue opportunities with the regulators, having this rule of and principle of consultation. You know that our system in general in Switzerland is based on principle-based regulation rather than fixed targets or metrics that you have to achieve. And I think in this respect, it has been very helpful to have this direct access. And perhaps the last element which I'd like to cite is that Switzerland has avoided the pitfalls of industrial policy, i.e. Switzerland considers that the role of the politician is to establish the framework within which the population, the social and economic actors will be able to develop, but it's not their duty to tell how this should be done. Their duty is to create the best possible conditions and then let the private sector decide about the industrial directions and or the business directions in which he wants to go. So a few items that do answer your questions about competitiveness.
Yeah, sure. So the government is not picking winners and losers. The winners, they're basically preparing the ground for anyone to become a winner.
Yes, I can
if
give
they've
you
got
an
the
example.
the wherewithal to do it, right?
Exactly. I can give you an example which bridges a little bit my current duty with some of the previous ones, which is everything that has to do with this new green waves in the world, which modifies easily what is green and what is not. And if it's not green, it's probably light green and or gets very quickly to the brown, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And at the end, this leads to decisions in some countries which will basically say, please invest or allocate capital in the green and not in the brown. So what does that tell you? It tells you that you have to qualify practically each industry one way or another, and that the government tells you, yes, please invest in that direction and in the other, which is industrial policy.
Yes,
basically not to be mixed with the truth of the matter with regard to sustainability, which is basically please invest in these companies and actors that are transforming themselves in the direction of being more sustainable. So that's a current example of what has been for long in Switzerland a tradition, not to mingle as a political system or political authority into the industrial decision-making of our sectors.
And the choice to make those investments would be the investor's choice because it's a good investment, right? And not because the government, put pressure on them to actually steer their investing money in that direction, right?
Well, it would first be the choice of the companies and the shareholders of those companies.
Well, of course,
themselves.
of course, yeah.
And then, of course, of the capital sources, whether the lending institutions or the investors to go that direction or not. But usually they prefer that than being dictated by the government where to invest.
Exactly. Let me come back to this access to the political system again. Would you say that a fresh entrepreneur who just comes to Switzerland to set up, let's say, European headquarters here from the U.S., Canada, from South Africa, Australia, doesn't matter where, would they also have this access?
Yes, I think absolutely. It's not even a sort of a conceptual approach to it, but it's a reality approach which goes through an organization in different cantons, practically all of them, that will cater for welcoming those requests for investments, addressing the various details that relate to them, and sort of make sure that they help transform these desires and wishes into a reality by facilitating not only access to one, but to all milestones that are the ones that are necessary to create or establish in Switzerland or to create a company in Switzerland.
Yeah. So it's not just an old boys network.
No.
It's actually anybody, or it's an old boys network that anyone can join in a certain sense, right?
Yeah, that it's boys and girls, by the way. But it's an organization that belongs to the state organization, but also is complemented by private organizations, which is the case, for instance, in Geneva, where the government of Geneva has put for long already an organization in place that will welcome those investment requests and or desire to establish firms, not necessarily on a theoretical or diplomatic basis, but on a pragmatic basis, i.e., what is it that you need now as a next step? Is it to find the suitable real estate for establishing your production facility, or is this to have authorizations to have immigration for some of your talents that you want to bring, or is this some perhaps from time to time fiscal facilities or anything else? And you can see this in particular with regard to the economy as being one of the advantage of Switzerland and especially of the Geneva greater area, but also it's true for international organizations, not necessarily business only related organizations. And if you take those international organizations today, we have a welcome bureau in Geneva for the internationalization, which basically is there at the start of a discussion, should you wish to establish your internationalization in Geneva, until it's been established to facilitate all the bolts and notes that are necessary to fix it correctly on site. And I think this is quite remarkable, I'll say.
I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Now, let me come back. So you listed now four of probably many, but four key advantages that make Switzerland competitive. If you would imagine, say, the next 10 years, would those four strengths of the country be, would you anticipate that they would get stronger relatively, or is one or maybe another in danger of becoming weaker or maybe even going away altogether?
No, I think they will continue to be essential strengths of the local environment in general for business and for organizations to establish, but also for people, mind you, because this stability creates an attractiveness for the place, which is very often, if not the first, the second reason why a company wants to establish or organization wants to establish in the greater Geneva area or in Switzerland in general, because of the quality of life, etc. So that's, to get into your question, that's probably where, in addition to what we want to keep as the four strengths I mentioned, and there are probably more, we want to make sure that the standards of living, the quality of living issues are being dealt with swiftly and intelligently by our authorities. And let me explain. I think that today is a world of huge transformation everywhere, of the way people behave, of the way people consume, of the way people live, of the way people have to live, take climate issues and things like this, which, of course, necessitate huge investments, at least transformation and probably a remodeling of some of the infrastructure that exists. It's very true in Europe. Switzerland has been affected as well. But it's true also in things such as transportation, such as energy and perhaps health in general, perhaps also in education. In all those infrastructural aspects, I think Switzerland has to make sure that not only it spends the beautiful chances it has to own perhaps more money for that purpose than other countries, but it spends it correctly.
Yeah.
And when I say spend, I should say invest it correctly.
Right.
And it does not only spend it. There's a bit of a spending by encouraging people to change their behavior, but there's also a fantastic opportunity here to recreate the infrastructure that will double down on the quality of life and attractiveness of the country. So that's where I think the country should be prudent.
Yeah.
If you look at the OECD reports, usually they mention Switzerland as being pretty high on the scale for infrastructure, where if you travel in the world today in new frontier countries, you will find many examples of infrastructure which we would like to have in our country.
Yeah.
So we have to be very agile in this respect.
Do you see Switzerland playing an international leadership role in this, or
in infrastructure? Depends where. I think we can play different roles, and when it comes to, for instance, our industries. Take the innovation drive that is taking place in the machinery industry, for instance, today, which has always been the strength of our country. Machines are produced from the smallest machine to do the smallest thing in the most complicated systems that you can imagine for life to exist or for the economy to exist, to the biggest infrastructure that exists, take building tunnels and building dams and things like this, which we know how to do pretty well. And I think in this respect, yes, there are areas where infrastructural examples that are developing in Switzerland could develop into models for the rest of the world. Could go directions of energy, where we know that we have to store energy tomorrow. We don't have all the solutions. Lots of research is being made in this country. Yeah, in this respect, it could be in other areas.
Yeah. Do you see switching a little bit the gear to the geopolitical kind of changes that are going on? Obviously, on the economic side and in terms of environmental sustainability, those trends we understand, and we'll come back to them in a moment. But just looking at the geopolitical trends that are happening, how does a small country like Switzerland see its changing role in the world, or its changing place in the world, or will its place even change? Will it just continue to be a beacon of neutrality, a place where anybody can come and talk and be supported to make sure that the geopolitical trends are well, I say not the trends, but necessarily geopolitical conflicts or touch points are actually discussed and problems are solved here on Swiss ground?
I think as long as we can keep the wisdom of being geared towards attracting the right thoughts process in our country,
the right thought process
in our country, we will be successful in keeping our role as mediator, as a place of dialogue, as a place of progressing rather than regressing in some of those conflict and situations or difficult otherwise situations in the world. And if you take a few examples, Switzerland has been very successful in attracting the peace thought process,
yes,
which is endangered seriously nowadays. It has to continue to play an important role in attracting all parties to dialogue and to establish these dialogues in Switzerland in particular. It could be for conferences, but it's also outside of conferences. It could be public, but it's also non-public.
Right.
And private or closed-door types of institutions, such as the Geneva Center for Public Crisis and Policy and Security is really important.
Yep.
And I think that's a role that should continue to be important for Geneva. It's true also in the in the humanitarian side, where we see that today there's a number of sources for humanitarian aid that are reducing or at least disappearing partially. And I think this creates a huge need for rethinking a little bit development aid in particular. I think Switzerland has been traditionally at the top of these kinds of issues. It's true for trade issues, where we see that the trade mechanism developed by the WTO are being challenged. And I think Switzerland has been hosting these kinds of institutions that are the ones should be attracting the new thought process in trade and things like this. So I think as long as we can, again, be attractive enough, and I will come to how we can do that in Switzerland, to bring this thought process on multilateralism, on crisis management, on mediation, on humanitarian, on peace, etc., on health perhaps, and perhaps tomorrow on things such as AI and or technology issue, we have a huge role to play.
Yes.
Because Switzerland is a stable, predictable country, which is in addition neutral in many sense, which still has to evolve and is evolving. This neutrality concept has to adapt to the times, but will evolve, and I think in a positive way for that. Yeah. So I think it is through these kinds of, this kind of attitude of preserving what has worked in the past, but also opening up as much as we can to new fields of interest for humanity in general, that we can preserve that role. Now, I spoke about opening. Actually, the openness of this country makes it for its strengths. This country is not taxing nearly anyone. I mean, everything is free to import in this country, contrary to many other countries where we, as Swiss industries, have to pay taxes. This country has always favored the ideas that, trade and commerce should be completely open, and that would benefit both parties, including ours.
Right.
For one good reason: we are close to 9.5 million inhabitants, consumers, if you wish, which is far, far below what's the critical mass for industry to be worldwide competitive.
Yes.
So we need this openness.
Yes. Right. Maybe this is a good segue for you to talk a little bit about building bridges, because it sounds to me like this is exactly the place where you're trying to bring together thought leaders to address these issues. But first of all, maybe go back a little bit in time. I think it was 2019, 19, yes, when this your first summit took place, right? How did that come about? Where did the idea come from? And tell us a little bit about how that idea sprang into life.
Oh, with pleasure. This idea stemmed from, I'd say, two major considerations. One is that from a professional point of view, a few others and myself have been involved in thinking about sustainable finance and the role of finance for sustainable transformation for decades already. Some quite early in the trend, we're already applying rules that made investments subject to decisions affected by the way the company was behaving in some of those sustainability aspects. And I think this conviction, which became an investment conviction, mind you, not only an ideological view of any sorts, because as professionals, we cannot afford being ideological about these issues, but we should be professional. But becoming professionally convinced that this was a good idea, came the idea that, if a few of us, were doing it successfully for our clients and investors worldwide, why is it that this is taking so long? And why is the industry is not taking the turn as fast as we are? Are we missing something? And looking at the other aspect, which was, who is there to tell us we were only financier with a limited knowledge of financiers on some of these issues? So the natural sciences specialists and the policy specialists, etc., who are they? And then, of course, immediately we noted that they're all here in this country, not only in this country, but they're all here in the Greater Geneva area.
Right.
40 international organizations setting standards in all those issues are based in Geneva. 10 minutes trip away by tram from your office.
Right.
If you want to take an appointment with the Secretary General of one of these organizations, if it's not this week, it's going to be next week, not in 2 years.
Right.
And you don't have to travel 600 miles to get there.
Right.
So this availability of expertise in Switzerland was the other reason why we said, look, it's strange because we have a long tradition, some of us, to invest and to look at sustainability. And then there's a hugely important availability of talent, expertise, and standard setters here in this very place that is not being in dialogue enough with this other part. So we decided to bridge the two and establish the dialogue between the two parts, which resulted into a first conference, which was a bit like a concept written on a napkin. And it was successfully received by the guests to these conferences, by the organizers, that is ourselves, the financial sector, and the international organizations, and by civil society that we included into the process extremely rapidly, so that this could become a true multi-stakeholder dialogue. I'm really using this multi-stakeholder really with care, because I don't want to use this conceptual approach. It's really anyone who has a role to play in the transformation towards a more sustainable planet and world should have and had, through building bridges, a way to express his or herself.
Right.
And I think that's what made probably the starting success of this organization. We were a bit Swiss at the beginning. We became much more international. We attracted 800 people the first edition. We are now 3,000 or so. So we are growing around the relevance of this concept of bringing people around the table to discuss the right issue at the right time with the right counterparty.
Right. Is there a way for you to measure the success of the event itself?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think the success to be measured has to be measured outside of building bridges.
Yeah.
It's not the organization. We don't take pride of any achievement ourselves, except having the best voices express themselves on the right agenda items.
Right.
Which we sometimes achieve, sometimes we don't. We have to improve every year. But I can say that the relevance and pertinence and the quality of the experts that we are now seeing asking to come is a sign of, I would say, progression, at least, of our pertinence. Sure. And I think, quality should always be the metrics through which you're looking at yourself as successful or not.
Right.
And I think the quality of the participant is really one of the success factor. It has been improving. The second, I think, the impact that I think we have had is probably to convince also our authorities perhaps to be a bit more open in this very dialogue that I was referring to before on sustainability issues. Because at the same time, there's a worldwide trend towards regulating that aspect.
Yes.
There's also a fantastic need to ensure that there's no over-regulation that will then be a huge burden on the shoulders of the economic agents that will tell, how come this sustainability is costing us so much? Right. Whereas, they should say,
it's quite a balancing
what
action.
an advantage it is to be sustainable rather than what a cost it is. So this
that's a huge persuasion challenge, isn't it? I think, right?
Yes, and it's a very interesting, I would say, it's not a goal in itself that we have set ourselves, but it's an impact we're trying to measure. Are our authorities perhaps more open to those dialogues between the economy, the finance, and themselves than they were before on some of the measures that should be taken on up? And the answer is yes.
Oh, good.
Private-public partnership has developed.
Right.
It's become a scene that is better understood. It's not yet where we want. Blended finance, which seems to be a conceptual aspect, bringing different sources of
blended finance. Can you explain what that is?
It's blending private and public capital in different ways.
Oh, okay.
To make sure that a structure can be financed, or an infrastructure, or transformation of a structure, or a sector
with
can
different
be
players, then, right?
Correct,
and not just all this or all that, then, right? I understand.
It's typically a way of investing and allocating capital in region of the world where the private capital itself would not go alone.
Yes.
Because the risks are too high, or because the conditions are not met there to satisfy all the criteria that they would have to.
Okay.
And that means that the public capital and also the public policies locally have to then mingle or blend with this private capital. This is an idea. So your question is about impact. I think these notions now are better discussed, are being if you wish, the demand for discussions and dialogues and perhaps solutions, and this is very important, solutions, has risen quite a lot, not only because of building bridges, of course, but because of the necessity of the times.
Well, and you're shining a light on this, then, right? Are you more than just a conferencing organization? Or is there something that, bridging the year between conferences, between summits? Do you have activities as well?
we do have many initiatives in this country that are looking both at the present and the future, trying to bridge the two, like making sure you take advantage of the current situation to even construct better the future. And I was once discussing with another initiative which has to do with anticipating science, which is taking place in Geneva, which is called GESDA. And I was talking with the initiator of GESDA, and they were telling me at the end, well, if I understand you correctly, Patrick, while we are talking about anticipating the future uses of science, which is the day after tomorrow, you are talking about tomorrow. So answer to your question is that, yes, we are geared towards the future, i.e. the only raison d'etre of building bridges is to build a bridge between now and the future,
Right.
between all those stakeholders to make the future better than it is today.
Well, that goes back to the point that I was making in introducing you, is that you are obviously a long-term thinker, but sometimes that can actually work against you, right? Because people say, but I've got problems right now. Or for me, the future is next year, and for you, the future seems to be 2 decades down the line. And it's not that they aren't convinced that your view is wrong, but they just can't prioritize it, right? What do you do about that sort of situation then?
You try to explain.
Yeah,
We are all in a hurry.
yeah,
But being in a hurry has never been a solution.
right.
So we have to take time as a constraint. And you have to realize that setting an objective in the long run does not mean that you cannot deviate, as long as you keep course on the long-term objective.
Okay,
So you have to explain, what is the long-term objective? Why is it so important?
right,
And how do you achieve it will be different, of course, from what you expect today,
right.
because the conditions are changing. You were alluding to geopolitical priorities, and they have changed, and unfortunately in an alarming way in the recent past. But that means that, for instance, energy sourcing has had to change its course.
Yeah.
We cannot simply think, and actually contradictory to anything that we could have thought at the beginning of this latest crisis. Well, perhaps even these geopolitical trends that have deviated us from the right track will bring us faster on the right track, because now it's cheaper, probably because of everything that's happening, to source energy by renewable source of energy than it is by traditional fossil energy sources. And that has come also from those geopolitical conditions that have changed. So you have to explain, what is the long-term objective?
Yes,
Why does it take time?
right,
Well, science and
right.
also the social angle to it, the transformation that is needed to get there, cannot be just done by a magic stick that will be, no, it cannot.
Yeah.
It has to be prepared, it has to be implemented. So yes, we have to make sure the pace is being optimized, but you should always remember this transformation will take time. Actually, if you want my true view on that, I don't think we estimate at its just level the quick or the speed with which the energy sector has been transforming in the last few decades. It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And we're using wind, we're using solar, we're using biomass, we're using sources that did not exist 50 years ago, 40 years ago. We're talking 50, 40 years in a world of 100 millions of years. So, of course, energy seems still to be one of the most damage-making type of industry when it comes to nature and climate. But at the same time, it has been transforming very fast.
Yeah.
But it's a 50 years type of trend.
Yeah, it's a good example of that. I think there's a cartoon I remember seeing where one person says to another, day by day, nothing seems to change. But suddenly you wake up once and you realize that everything's different.
Yes.
And it's with the fullness of time that you realize just that these little changes that come along bit by bit have actually transformed, like you said, an entire industry, entire sector of the economy.
But Switzerland is a country which is quite sensitive to that.
Yes.
And again, if you want to establish in a country which wants to respect those criteria, you probably will be well off in Switzerland. First of all, because it's a country of nature, it's a country of water, it's a country of sustainable energy supplies.
It's top of mind here.
Yes, and it's a country which thinks about what it does. Think about, because simply the population is being asked about every single aspect of its life.
That's right.
And that means that if you don't like...
Even about itself.
Yes. If you don't like do you know many countries which will vote on their taxes? So, if you want more money to be spendable for transformation of energy structures and things like this, and education and health, etc., just ask the people.
Right.
So the chances that the right decisions are made by this system are quite high.
Yeah.
So sometimes slow.
Yes. Right.
True.
Sure.
But at least changes is bought in by the population. Right. Hence, again, stability.
Right. Oh, it's interesting. So I never really thought about it this way, but in a way, what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's like one of the strengths of this country is an inherent trust in the wisdom of crowds. That expression. Now, of course, a vote can go the wrong way, right? That's what votes can, putting this decision to the population doesn't necessarily mean everything will always turn out the way you want it to. But even in a case where a referendum result is something, that was not necessarily wished, it's used here, isn't it, as a signal to try a little harder and get back and fix the messaging or be more persuasive and try again, and maybe a couple of years down the line. So it's not. My impression here is that it's not a rebuke necessarily, but it's just like, no, we're not quite ready for that because you haven't sold me on it yet. Me, the voter. Right?
I think
something like that.
If you look historically about the result of the democratic process by votes in Switzerland,
right.
in general, on critical issues, it has demonstrated a certain wisdom of the population.
Yeah, I think so.
You still have to be careful that because when you're lucky enough to have a system such as ours, the risk is that you forget about how lucky you are and you don't express yourself as much as you should.
Yeah.
So we have to be balancing those two aspects.
Yes.
And, that's why I'm saying in everything life is bringing you to think about, you have to express the most stringent demand.
Yeah.
You should never let it to the politicians or bureaucrats in a global sense, the authority to transform society.
Yeah.
It is you. And if you have a direct democratic system as we do have, it's even more important that you express strong demand for any change.
Yes.
But also that if you're not convinced, like the Swiss do, this very subject that they're now proposing to us, frankly speaking, I don't understand about it. And so what do? The prudent man rule, you abstain.
Yeah.
And when you abstain, it means that usually you're avoiding bad decision.
Right.
But of course you go a bit slower. Mm-hmm. So I would go with your comment. In general, it's been a wise process. Mm-hmm. We just went through a number of critical votations that are very touchy because they touch the world,
right?
Whether immigration and other aspects. And I think in this respect, we've seen that even a country where the largest local party is in favor and strong favor of a cause, country can say, yes, we elected you to be the largest party, but we don't agree with you on this one.
Yeah. Interesting. Are you familiar with Scott Adams? Does that name ring a bell to you?
Rings a bell, yes.
Okay. Well, without going into a lot of detail about who he was, he died about a year ago. He had a sort of philosophical point, which was that systems are better than goals. And he said works in corporations, it works for an individual. So take an individual as an example. Oh, I need to lose 10 kilos. And it's hard to lose 10 kilos. You go through some program, whatever, and it doesn't necessarily work and you get discouraged. You go off the program or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that works for everybody, but that's common. However, if you would just say, every morning when I get out of bed, I'm just going to walk around the neighborhood, and before I even have my first banana of the day, and there's one other thing I'm going to do. I'm going to start playing more tennis. It's not a goal at all, but deciding that these two systematic things that you're going to start or introduce into your life actually end up leading towards this goal. And so now bringing this back to something a little bit more substantial, you were mentioning before about these longer term goals having to do with sustainability. I was just, when you said that, you used the word objective, of course, but I was thinking, are we talking about sort of like an actual objective saying by the year 2036, 71% of the energy in this country should be produced sustainably, for example, as opposed to whatever it is right now. So that becomes a goal, and then everybody runs for it. Or could it be better, or could it be at least a different approach that could lead to the same thing, not by talking about an objective, which seems maybe like a little bit of a stretch to some people, but rather to say, why don't we make these lots of small changes and miraculously we'll get there? I don't know if that makes any sense, but it occurred to me as you were talking about the word objective in the longer term.
No, thank you for the question. I think at Building Bridges and in general, what we're fostering is first of all, is the federation of expertise around common goals. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a question of what goal. And because the temptation is too big to go in all directions and reinvent not only the wheels, but everything.
Yes.
In all those issues that are completely open, such as climate and nature and social impacts of all those changes. So making the thought process converge very quickly reaches milestones in history and potential future milestones where things are better defined. One of them was the COP21, setting of goals with regard to climate. Mm-hmm. How long did it take to the best scientists in this world to come up with this simple metrics of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius to reach? Took a long time to get this simple thing. But what was the translation of that simple, if I may say?
Yeah.
Very complex to get it, but the metrics itself is simple to understand.
Right.
Everybody
understands that. Yes, right.
Okay. But it made possible to anyone sort of relate a bit differently to climate issues. Oh my God, we're talking about raising temperature.
It's just this one number, right?
There's this one number, and it's, I can see it on my thermometer in my kitchen, and it's easy to, okay. Yeah. So today, for instance, how did that influence some sectors? I'll give you an example. My own sector. Yeah. Finance. If you're talking to those actors in the industry, such as ourselves, for instance, but others, about the climate impact of your portfolio, the first thing you can now see is portfolio being addressed to you by way of 3 metrics, the 2 traditional, the risks you're taking in your savings, the return you're getting in your savings, and the contribution to the elevation of the temperature of the world through the choice of your investments in the portfolio. You can do it.
Seriously, that number is
more
attainable and immeasurable and becomes part of the reporting?
And many more than only the temperature. You can measure the meat content. If you're telling me that you think it's better to eat less meat to reduce the emission than it is to use less fossil energy, I can calculate the meat content of your portfolio that you can then decide to reduce if you want it.
Yes.
So, I mean, it makes you potentially smile, but it's really serious. It means... many scientists take a long time to find a very simple metrics that will speak to everyone, provided it's the right one, right?
Right.
We know we don't want elevation of temperature, so 1.5 Celsius is okay, 2 Celsius is okay. Now, think of the rest. Think about nature. How are you going to define nature as an objective? Is this the amount of land that is unused in the world, or that has been ill-used, or is it the number of hectares in the world that are not being regenerated anymore, that are being destroyed? Right. Or is this the number of species that are disappearing per year, etc.? So there's huge work to be done in trying to find metrics in other areas now, such as nature, biodiversity, etc., that will help the minds to focus. So that's, to answer your question, system versus objectives. You need both. Actually, if you want to promote regenerative agriculture, agriculture is one of the biggest sources of emission in the world, which is our food system, which is plenty of contradictions in itself, because we grow thousands of hectares of crops to just feed animals that will be destroying the climate because of the way they live. And so if you want to do that, you have to have metrics, and you have to have simple metrics. Another area, which is very interesting in my view in this respect, system versus metrics, is accounting. How do you hope to have the economic agent change their behavior if they cannot relate what they do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it is to come up with what we call the materiality issues.
Mhm.
What's the impact of the changes of the environment on your business financially?
Right.
One side.
Right.
What's the impact of your activity on the environment? Second side.
Yes.
And this is now starting to be a very, very seriously discussed issue that has been promoted by an organization that was created 5 years ago, that has now established a first set of standards that will become the worldwide standard in accounting, allowing any economic actor, a bakery store, a bank, any energy company to say,
Big to small.
the impact of my activity on the environment is this, and the impact on the environment, on my activity is this. If it costs me more to continue to do that than change the way I produce, then I will change the way I produce. And that's what we want ultimately.
Mhm.
And that's a system change.
Right. Yes.
So metrics will allow system changes.
But yeah, I understand. The system actually kind of follows the metrics
Exactly.
in a way.
And that's what building bridges is about.
Yeah.
Bringing this discussion, sometimes a bit difficult.
Yeah.
It's technical, of course,
Sure.
but to try to make them simpler and also to make the civil society buy into it.
Yes.
Because as long as it costs you immediately, you will say no.
Well, I think that's the big problem with these kinds of summits is that it's just people talking to each other, but without finding a way to actually get the message out in a persuasive way that everyone buys into it and says, yes, this was not just obviously a very successful summit with all these leading minds coming up with these great things, but they've convinced me that I need to take a look at the way that I'm actually contributing or could contribute to the solution, maybe, possibly.
And you see, what we want to give as a message, we collectively at Building Bridges, is that it's not only a world of threats.
Mhm.
You never manage good solutions by way of frightening people. Never, ever. But hope helps.
Yeah.
And this is full of opportunities and hopes.
Right.
If you transform correctly these systems you were referring to, rightly so, you will create huge opportunities to improve the well-being of the population, to be better elected because you made the better decisions, to have new areas of studying if you're a student or teacher,
Yes.
and also to invest better if you are an economic agent.
Yeah.
And I think this angle, showing opportunities in this system transformation, take it food, take it health, take it education, transportation, any system that has to be changed today, will probably bring us today in a situation which has never been as open in terms of opportunities. That's a message that Building Bridges in Switzerland, based in Geneva, is trying to pass. And I think with some success, because its audience is growing.
Yeah. It's a very positive message. We could end there, but I have one final question that I would like to ask you, just to bring it back to Switzerland. Obviously, with all these other factors, a part of Switzerland. If I could sort of snap my fingers and zap you 15 years into the future, and you could spend a day walking around Lausanne or wherever you want to go, what do you think you would see here that would surprise you?
I think I would see a city which is much greener than, or cities in this area of the country that are much greener than they used to be, because
But would that surprise you?
it would surprise me.
It would.
Yes, because it still takes time today
Okay.
to make sure that we make that investment,
Mm-hmm.
that we stop building irrationally,
Right.
and that we build more rationally. It doesn't mean we should build less, but we should build better.
Mm-hmm.
And the greening the urban center for me is a good surprise to be in 15 years from now, which I think has still to be subject to a lot of convincing, not only to the public authorities,
Mm-hmm.
but to the private sector.
Right.
And I think that would be very helpful, because it will increase the well-being of the population that today is really at risk with these radical changes, for instance, in climate that we're living through nowadays, which go together with some prohibitions, such as the one of establishing a cooling system in your home in this part of the country.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You cannot survive the heat wave, but you cannot cool yourself down because it's forbidden.
Yeah.
So that's not a good solution.
Right.
So that could only create good surprises if it is solved. So how to do that?
Yes.
Transform the way you build.
Right.
And green your urban area. That's one example. Many, many, many more to see.
Yes. Is there anything that you think, I promised only one question, but I've just got to follow up to that one. The qualities that you talked about that define or help to define Switzerland's competitiveness, they're timeless in your mind?
No, you have to fight every day for it. Of
Interesting.
course, you have to fight every day for it. And it's not
They're
a
not
matter
givens.
of them and us. It's
Yeah.
a matter of all of us.
Yeah.
So you have to be managing your company so that you keep the better people, continue to attract the better people, continue to attract the better clients, continue to open the markets as much as you can rather than
Yes.
close, etc. When you're an economic actor.
Yeah.
When you're a public servant, you have to make sure that you listen to the needs and the demand of the population, and you don't create those paradoxes I was alluding to.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that you create the right frame conditions for those businesses to develop according to what I just said.
Just don't take advantage of
Certainly,
the fact that
it's
you
a
think
fight of every day.
that will just happen. It's a given.
It's a fight of every day, and it's a good fight.
Yeah.
Positive fight, because it brings positive results.
Fantastic. Patrick, thank you very much for joining me for this last hour. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next time.